Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma is my vote for Game of the Year. I know it'll never happen, but I think it deserves it. It was the revival this series needed. For those not in the know, Rune Factory is an action RPG fantasy life sim spin-off of Story of Seasons, which used to be called Harvest Moon, a series that is now about spitting on the graves of our nostalgia. Guardians of Azuma puts more emphasis on the action RPG part than most Rune Factory games, and also adds a neat town building and management system. And unlike Tides of Destiny, the farming wasn't butchered as a result. They did do a lot of system overhauls, of which some are decent alternatives to the mainline formula. However, I hope they reserve these systems for spin-off games only going forward, not the mainline games. So I guess I'm asking for a spin-off series for this spin-off series. We'll get back to that in a bit, but first, what is Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma? The game takes place in a fantasy not Japan which has been fractured into floating islands, most of which are full of dungeons. But 4 of the larger ones have towns on them, one for each season. You start in the spring village, go to summer, then fall, and then winter, solving all their problems, making friends with the residents, and then becoming the village chief of each settlement. There is a huge emphasis on the village management system for the slice of life segments of the game. You can build buildings and place them around in your development zones, or you could choose to just put a massive field everywhere and farm to your heart's content. As far as the farming goes, yes, you can treat it like any other farming sim, slowly sowing and watering seeds one by one every day. Or you can go into a new overhead mode that streamlines the process. You can mass plant seeds, mass water, mass harvest, and go around placing your buildings in this mode. It is an extremely convenient system and works great for what this game is trying to be. Yes, it removes some of the cozy farming charm, but for a spin-off, I thought it was great. Every unique building gives you bonuses to your stats, so engaging with the management system is highly recommended. And it works very well in this game. I love decorating my villages, trying to make them look as aesthetically pleasing as possible while simultaneously trying to min-max my stats. It's not required to do so, but it was how I like to play it. I think this part is actually a pretty big draw for the game, like trying to make your islands beautiful in Animal Crossing. As far as the depth of the management system goes, you try to get villagers to join your village and boost their economic output either through farming or placing buildings for them to work at. Villagers all have a random assortment of skills that either boost or hamper their stats, and getting the best villagers is equivalent to rolling an SSR in your typical gacha game. Luckily, it's much cheaper than your typical gacha game. Just make sure you have enough space for them by evicting the leeches on society. What's that? You're lazy, eat a lot, and don't do any work? Sorry, Neat, but you're gonna get evicted. Good luck out there. That said, it's not actually vital for you to min-max your villagers. It's just there if it tickles your fancy. Originally, I was going to rant about how the villagers are brain-dead vegetables, unlike what they pretend to be growing. When the game first came out, villagers would plant seeds at random regardless of the plant species or their seed level. Maybe you want all your strawberries in one area and all your potatoes in another. But no, AI can do many things, but farming is definitely not one of them. They'll just toss seeds out haphazardly. Either that, or you'd be trying to harvest veggies with your fire sword, this game's version of the sickle, and they just come out of nowhere and yoink the crops out of the ground before you can get to them. However, as I was writing the script, they've released a patch that now lets you change some settings for your farmer so they actually do adhere to some degree of order instead of living in complete and total anarchy. I still think that you should be the one that micromanages what seeds get planted, but now you can tell your villagers not to sow seeds and just focus on watering and harvesting. Aside from town management, you can also spend time with your villagers, getting to know, date, and marry them as you would expect from this kind of game. The game actually has a total of 16 marriage candidates, albeit 2 are DLC, which makes it the Rune Factory with the most in the series. I will say that there's not a single character that I dislike in this game. Maybe 1 or 2 I'm a bit indifferent to, but the characters in this game are extremely likable, perhaps the best out of any farming sim out there, that I've played anyway. In Guardians of Azuma, you can actually spend your time with your villagers in a manner of ways. You can give them gifts, invite them to an izakaya, go for walks on the beach, and a whole bunch of other things that actually made me want to spend time with everyone more than I do typically in these kinds of games. Usually you would just talk to everyone once a day and maybe throw a fish at them to make them like you more. But in this game, I actually wanted to spend my time doing every action with every character to see how they would respond, or to see every unique animation for every action. Now, different actions do have different tiers associated with them, and if you try to invite someone to an izakaya that you haven't gotten to know very well, they may reject the idea outright. Think about it. Would you follow some random dude you just met into a bathhouse because he gave you some dongo yesterday? Probably not. You need to get closer to people before you can do some more intimate actions with them, and I think that brings more realism to the system. There are also bond events which you'll recognize from the other Rune Factory and Story of Seasons games. As you get to know your villagers, they'll have different story arcs you can follow as you get closer to them. Not all are made equal, unfortunately, but I did think that they made me like almost all the characters more than I would have otherwise. The cast is great. And overall, the social aspects of the game are a nice direction that I really did enjoy. I would like to see them expanded upon in future games in the series. Unfortunately, they removed town events outside of the Bond event, so that's kind of a letdown. I hope they'll bring them back in future games. Since we talked about the life sim and village management portions of the game, let's now talk about combat. The combat in this game is actually very smooth. There's multiple types of weapons you can specialize in, though I ended up just going with the default longswords myself. Of course, if you played Rune Factory 5, you're probably wondering about the game's difficulty. I can tell you that this game actually does have some difficult moments in it, but for the most part, it's pretty easy. Not as much as 5 was, but not quite to my liking either. I played the game on the highest difficulty and only lost a handful of times, most of which were to weird BS one-shot moves from bosses. That said, every boss has its weaknesses, and once you know what those weaknesses are, you can exploit them for extreme damage using your divine powers as an Earthmate, or an Earth Dancer as this game calls them. You were called to be an Earth Dancer by the divine dragon, Moko something, who acts as your sidekick throughout the game. The 4 seasonal villages all have resident gods who have declined in power, and you must set out on an adventure to restore them. Along the way, they bless you with their divine artifacts that all have unique abilities both on your fields and in combat. The first one you unlock is a drum from the Spring Goddess. It gives you an AoE heal in combat, but also speeds up the growth of your plants by 1 day, though you can only use it once per day per plant. The Summer Goddess gives you the Fire Sword from earlier, which deals AoE damage to enemies. It can also be used in your field to somehow potentially increase the seed level of your crops. Don't ask me how it doesn't burn down the entire field. It just works. It had some hitbox issues originally, but they've patched the game to help out with that. The Autumn God gives you a fan that gives you a ranged attack that also allows you to sprint faster while out in dungeons. And the farm, it is unfortunately practically useless, as all it does is allow you to harvest seeds at the cost of RP, which you can already do in the overhead mode mentioned earlier, which does not cost RP. The Winter God gives you a parasol that deals literal splash damage to enemies nearby, basically a water version of the sword from earlier. It also helps you water your plants in the fields, but again, it's basically useless due to the same reason that the fan is. There's a couple of other items for light and dark, which are primarily used for combat, though they do have some minor uses out while exploring the islands and dungeons. Overall, these tools are great and you can swap them out mid-combat at will to great effect. It does make the game a bit too easy, but again, it's not so easy that I didn't have fun with it. I enjoyed the game quite a bit in the end. Now, I'd like to talk about the game's plot, but I also think that you should experience it for yourself. So I'm going to try to avoid anything too spoilery, but there are a couple of things to make note of. First, this game does have a great story. Not as good as Rune Factory 4's in my opinion, but it's still really good. At least for like 99% of it. There's a couple of contrived plot points towards the end of the game that I'm not going to spoil. But I mean, I can look past a couple of minor issues if the rest of the game is great. I mean, my favorite Final Fantasy is 8, so yeah, I'd look past major plot issues as long as the rest of the game is great. But luckily that's not the issue here. By and large, this game has a very good plot with very good pacing. The plot does tend to favor certain villagers over others, but I mean, after playing Trails of Cold Steel, I think I'm fine when games don't try to force every character into every cutscene. Secondly, and this is a spoiler for one specific part of the main story, but I just have to point it out because of how ridiculous it is. How much value do you place on a soul? Because there's a very specific point in the game where you have to forfeit something equivalent to the price of your soul, and it literally accepts all of your money should you choose to do so, even if that amount is 1, or even 0. Your soul is literally worth less than dirt. Congratulations. I've never felt more insulted by a game that I love. Bravo for that achievement. Lastly, this game does have some serious balls. I would like to talk more about it, but it's a major spoiler. It's kind of associated with the last point though, so keep that in mind. I don't think anybody would make a certain decision, but I can't believe that the game would not only allow you to choose it, but then follow through with it if you do. With all the praise I've given this game, you must be wondering, what are its flaws? Well, they patched out most of them already, so the only real one I have, aside from the contrived plot points that I mentioned earlier, is that this game has hundreds of recipes and no method to truly sort them. Like seriously, please add an alphabetical sort list or something, I'm begging you. I just want to make some anvil curry, please, where the heck is it? Also, you have a series of requests to do to level up each village. Most of the time, this is perfectly fine. However, there are some things that are a bit unfriendly to the user. For example, you have to grow one of every non-golden and non-grain crop in every village. It just tells you how many you've grown total, but it doesn't actually tell you which specific ones you've grown. So if you only have one left, there's no way to tell which one that is, so you just end up planting everything in order to cover your bases. Again, it's not that big of an issue, but it just feels like an oversight. With the current build of the game, these are really the only 2 issues that I had. I heard some people say that the frame rate would sometimes stutter on Switch, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it was in Rune Factory 5, and they overall enjoyed it. I played the game on PC and on my Steam Deck and didn't have any frame rate issues. Overall, I guess maybe the Switch version has slight performance issues, but not enough to be a major issue like it was in Rune Factory 5, so I'd say that the game basically doesn't have any major flaws. That said, there are a couple of things of note that I do want to mention, especially for those who have already experienced Rune Factory 4 and 5. There are no longer any stats associated with your daily activities, or even your combat activities. You gain XP in different categories that you can spin in a skill tree that now increases your stats, so long are the days where you can literally just sleep yourself to thousands of HP, and I'm a bit mixed on this change. In Rune Factory 4 and 5, there was more emphasis on the mundane task of running around your village and talking to people. Everything you did seemed to have some skill level associated with it, so no matter how you played the game, you always felt like you were getting at least somewhat stronger in some regard. Running around to all the townsfolk would increase your stats, talking to them would increase your stats, farming increased your stats, and so on. It made the mundane feel profound. That's not really the case here. You grow through a skill tree. It's not bad by any means, in fact I still very much enjoyed it. I just prefer the system in Rune Factory 4 and 5. It made the life sim aspect more fun to play. Going forward, I'd personally prefer if they went back to the old system, or maybe if they made a mainline Rune Factory series with the old system and then kept a spin-off series that used this newer system that's more focused on the action RPG part of the game. Again, it's not really a detractor for the game itself. In a vacuum, I think it works quite well. It's just, because I've played Rune Factory 4 and 5, I know what changed versus now. And again, I do like this system, I just don't like it as much as what came before. It's not a negative for the game, but I did think I would mention it. Outside of the game itself, there is one more negative that I do have to mention, and that's that this game had Day 1 DLC. And not just cosmetic DLC, but it locks you out of 2 marriage candidates. I cannot fathom the reasoning behind this decision, but it's stuff like this that breaks trust with the fan base. And after Rune Factory 5's terrible launch on Switch, I can't believe that they did something like this. The worst part is that Best Girl is one of those candidates. Pilika, my beloved. Everybody should have the chance to get with my wife. It's just such a shame that they did this. These shoddy business practices have to stop. I demand justice for Pilika. Anyway, as far as the game's length goes, I got over 90 hours of enjoyment from this game. You could definitely beat it in much less time than that, but I did want to enjoy this game to its fullest. The town management and decoration system was fun, the plot was great, and I enjoyed the life sim aspect. That said, now that I've beaten the game, I can conclude that I think Rune Factory 4 does do the life sim stuff better. There's not that much to do after beating the game. You can get married, have 2 kids, and then do an extra dungeon. And due to the absence of town events and the streamlining of the farming system, I don't really find much enjoyment of just going around doing life sim stuff every day. But in the end, I spent over 90 hours doing everything in the game. So can I really fault the post-game for being so short? I don't think so. Overall, I loved Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma. It's the first game I've played in over a decade where I felt like I enjoyed it as much as I did when playing games as a kid. Thanks, adult responsibilities. I do highly recommend this game. If you like farm sims or action RPGs, I think you should give it a try. I do think some will be let down by the life sim elements not being as good as in Rune Factory 4's, but I think the action RPG and town management stuff more than make up for it. Rune Factory 4 is still king for me, but this is a very close second. As such, I hope you all get a chance to enjoy this game as much as I did.